Welcome to the Power and Market Report. I'm Albert Liu, coming to you live from Southern California at sprottmedia.com. Got a very special treat for you today. Joining me via Skype is Jeffrey Tucker. He's the editorial director of the American Institute for Economic Research, and I'm so happy to have him back on the show. It's been a very long time. Jeffrey, thank you for coming back to the Power and Market Report after, I think, maybe 3 years. Welcome back.
Something like that, yeah. It's nice to talk to you again, Albert. Thank you for suggesting this idea.
It's very good to have you. And the reason, well, I should first mention that this program is sponsored by the 2018 Natural Resources Symposium in Vancouver. Details at sprottconference.com. But it was also facilitated by our friends at the Libertopia conference. So, Jeffrey, you're going to be speaking there. Can you tell us a little bit about the conference and what you're going to be talking about?
Sure. I think this is going to be a big year for Libertopia, actually. I think we skipped a year. It has had something like maybe a 5-year history, and I've been 2 of those years. Both were very exciting and different. You know, the California libertarian world is slightly different from the New Hampshire world or the Texas world or the Georgia world. It just has a different feel, and people are interested in different kinds of topics. And it's always mind expanding in some way. And this year it's been promoted really well, and I think we got a lot of good speakers. They very graciously invited me to be the MC of the event. So I'll be giving a lot of tiny talks, you know, as MCs do. And if an lecture doesn't show up, I'll improvise and speak for an hour. I don't know, but I think I am scheduled for one big talk, and I will talk about the thing that's consuming me entirely in front of libertarian audiences, which is how to conceive of ourselves and our mission in a different way. And I think that involves trying to understand what we call libertarianism as an iteration of, if not synonymous with, the long 500-year history of the emancipation project called liberalism. And I think it's a better term. It's a broader term, but I think it's a more accurate term. And the advantage of using the word liberal as opposed to libertarian is that it connects us with our past, from which we've been cut off, and it connects us with our tradition around the world, with whom we've been more or less as Americans cut off. So I think I'll try to explain that and hopefully inspire these libertarian radicals, and we are that, to think of themselves as more normal people with the higher moral ground and really part of the future.
I think that's a lot of us are in favor of a movement in that direction, Jeffrey. What do you think about the idea that that term will be misconstrued, or often is, or has been redefined, actually?
It has, and that's a struggle we face. I mean, language is always approximate anyway. I mean, in terms of linguistic theory, I'm a descriptivist rather than a prescriptivist, but I do think that the word liberalism has a special place in the history of language. Liberalism has, you know, the equivalent in every language. It's only in American English where it means the opposite of what it's supposed to mean. And I agree with Mises that we just can't give it up. We have to, it's our term and it's our concept, it's our philosophy, most importantly. And the fact that when we use it, it's going to be misconstrued, it depends on how you use it. If you talk about liberalism, the liberal project, it's less likely to be misconstrued than when you call yourself a liberal. I'm a liberal. People are going to think you're a progressive, right? But on the other hand, I don't think that confusion is necessarily a bad thing, because it opens up an opportunity to speak, you know, and getting people to listen to you is half the battle, I think, in the world of ideology. And so if you say something interesting, like I'm a liberal, but I want to cut the government out of every area of life, you know, not just speech and the court system and this sort of thing, and policing, but also out of commercial life, I think it does open up an opportunity for a genuine conversation. So confusion isn't always terrible.
I guess that's true. If it's the beginning of a conversation, Jeffrey, you've written, I guess, about liberty in many interesting and actually useful ways. And the other day when we were talking, you said that, and this is part in joke, obviously, but two of your greatest contributions have been the art of shaving and Bitcoin as an investment. And so we can talk about shaving if you want, but probably people on this program want to hear more about Bitcoin.
The shaving article was funny. I think I wrote it maybe 2009, 2010, and I was just looking for a topic to write about. And so I just threw it out there, and it's an implausible essay for me because I was attacking a commercial product, whereas I'm usually celebrating commercial products, but sometimes there's scams out there, you know. And so I wrote an article explaining, in really evocative detail, why shaving cream is very bad for men and people shouldn't use it and how to get off of it. And I don't know why that article just went viral, and it's gone viral for years, and even to this day. Every time I go to a conference and somebody comes up to me and says, "Jeffrey Tucker, I just have to thank you," and 9 times out of 10, it's about the shaving question. I think it's been my key contribution to life. The Bitcoin thing is interesting too, because I always have to remind people that I started off as an extreme skeptic of this thing. I had a very old-fashioned attitude, even though I celebrated the digital world. I had built many websites, and I was in love with just the value of code as a productive unit of economic life. I just somehow reserved in my mind a separate place for money. Like somehow it could never be. You could never just create a money out of code. And it shows my lack of vision. And when you carry around a theory that contradicts your reality, that contradicts the reality around you, it's a problem, because you just refuse to see very obvious things. And fully, it took me 3 years to come around to the realization that, oh my God, this stuff actually works. And then another almost 2 years to figure out why it works. And then an additional 2 to 3 years after that to figure out what is the ultimate use value of blockchain technology. So I mean, it's been a long intellectual process for me, which is funny because there's plenty of people who looked at Satoshi's invention in late 2009 and said, "Oh, this is great. I'm going to go for it." Sometimes it's harder to unlearn things than it is to learn them.
True. Now, if it took you that long, you must have been a very, very early investigator, Jeffrey, because by the time I had met you, and I think at this point that was maybe 5 years ago, you were a pretty strong advocate. We're talking about 2013.
Yeah, it was loaded on, and it was funny because I guess I was curious in 2010. I was by 2011 maybe excited, but by 2012 I found myself in a position of dread. Like, I had a feeling that Bitcoin was going to defy all the trends, all the theories of monetary orthodoxy, but I didn't want to know how or why, and it just sounded like an exhausting prospect to learn all about cryptography and dig into the code and to understand what a distributed network is and why we should have cloud-based ledgers and how Bitcoin keeps track of ownership rights, and just the intellectual project just sounded to me exhausting. And here's the other thing: I didn't have any skin in the game at that point, which is always a mistake. Like, you learn better when you have boots on the ground and skin in the game, as Nassim Taleb points out. Otherwise, it's just abstract knowledge. You can take your time learning it or not. So by early 2013, once I became a kind of an owner of Bitcoin, then I wouldn't say a financial incentive. It's not just financial incentive. It's that something that's yours now you suddenly care about. And I had experienced how it works. So I had to go back to the drawing board and sort of unlearn a lot of things I thought I knew about monetary theory. And that took just a lot of study. It took 2 or 3 months of reading books on cryptography and understanding distributed networks. And I found that I knew a lot. I didn't understand double key cryptography. That was new to me. But I did understand a lot about distributed networks since I followed the Napster case very closely. I had learned the bigger lesson that stops a lot of people from understanding about cryptocurrency, which I could just maybe refer to in the phrase the economics of information. Information is valuable. It's the most valuable thing, more valuable than all physical capital in the world. And if you can figure out a way to arrange those information flows in immutable packets that become an analog to the physical world, you've got some really extraordinary potential there. And that's essentially what happened. And so the revelation dawned on me. But I must tell you, I was writing about Bitcoin, I think in February 2013, before I really had an understanding about why it worked. That it worked, I was certain enough to risk my reputation on it. And it was an enormous risk. I remember when I wrote my first article, it was like the ceiling fell in. I mean, everybody was denouncing me. Oh, you've embraced a Ponzi scheme. This is silly stuff. You know, how can you, Jeffrey Tucker, the once great Austrian economist, throw yourself into this world? This is a disgrace and an embarrassment. You know, have you become that professionally desperate, and so on? I mean, the personal attacks were just brutal. And then I had to ride the roller coaster of the price, right? So then, you know, I think when I first wrote about it, the Bitcoin was maybe $18, something like that, and it went up to 30, and people were screaming, "Oh, this is a bubble!" And I didn't know if it's a bubble. What am I supposed to know? I mean, I'm writing about the technology. I don't know if the price is too high or too low. I mean, how am I supposed to know these things? I don't know. I was just writing about it as a pure technology. I wasn't predicting, oh, it's going to go up. I wasn't giving anybody investment advice, and I still don't. In fact, let me be clear that you know, in all these comments, I'm not giving any investment advice, and I'm not speaking to the American Institute for Economic Research. I'm just observing as a theoretician, you know, what works and what doesn't. But nonetheless, people will evaluate your words according to what happens to the market. So that, you know, went up to 30, then it went up to 60, went up to 90, 130, and then crashed again. And people were blaming me for being part of a pump and dump. You know, it was just. So I had to kind of deal with that, and I had to become tough at that point because of course we've gone through something like 12 different gigantic swings in price over the last since the fall of 2009. So you know, over the last I guess you would say eight and a half years, and you get strong. You know, and so the most recent, you know, large but not the largest collapse of 70% from the highs didn't really shake me that much. You know, I just, you know, I believe in the technology, and I know it's coming back, and sure enough it is. And you just this is what you expect from a new technology. It's not often that something this spectacular comes along. In fact, I think it's been a long time, maybe since the invention of the internet, since we've really had anything like this, you know, something this new and this wonderful at the same time.